Hello everyone, this is Miss Ava Hart. Today is Sunday, November the 8th, 2020, and it is 1:40 p.m. This video will go over, or we will review the baseline assessment that a total of 25 of you took on the week of, let me look at my notes, the week of September 21st, 2020. 25 of you completed this baseline assessment the week of September 21st, 2020. So 25 of you will receive a message from me, a private message from me in your Teams app to let you know that you are to retake this assessment. Now, the purpose of this assessment that was administered the week of September 21st, 2020 was for me to assess what you were coming to me with. What type of knowledge, what type of skills were you coming to me with from 8th grade? All right, so let's review. A baseline assessment is to find out a student's learning needs, their natural ability, and potential. So I gave you this baseline assessment because I wanted to find out what is it that you need to learn? What is it that you already know that you're naturally good at? And what is your natural potential? The purpose of this baseline assessment that was administered on September 21st, 2020 was 1. Did you know how to cite strong textual evidence? Could you go back to the text and find lines from the text or from the story to support your opinion or to support your answer? That's textual evidence. This baseline assessment also was meant to assess, could you identify the central idea? The main reason why the author wrote this particular text. Also, this baseline assessment was to assess whether or not you understood how an author developed characters in a text or in a story or in a passage. And what I mean by that is, how do the characters change? How do they interact with each other? And how does the characters make the plot more interesting? That's what I mean about development of characters. Could you read this story, this passage, and determine how the main character changed? Or did the main character change? Could you read this passage or this story and understand how the characters reacted with each other? And could you read this text or this short story and explain or understand or comprehend how the characters made the plot more interesting? And this baseline assessment also assessed whether or not you knew the meaning of words, vocabulary. Could you determine the meaning of words using context clues without using a dictionary? Could you infer or make an educated guess about the meaning of words without using a dictionary? This baseline assessment also was meant to assess, could you tell me why did the writer write the story in the way that they did? Excuse me. That's called author's choice to structure a text. Could you tell me why the author wrote the story the way that they did? And then this baseline assessment also was supposed to assess whether or not you could write a constructed response, whether or not you could read the question for a writing prompt and then answer the question in one paragraph. That's what a constructed response is. is that you get a question based on what you just read, and you answer the question in a paragraph. You answer the question in a paragraph using textual evidence to support your answer. That is what a constructed response is. So when I gave you this baseline assessment on, and you have to excuse the noise, when I gave you the baseline assessment on the week of September 21st, 2020, this is what I was looking for. To see whether or not you learned these things in 8th grade English class. And if you didn't, then that meant that I had to go back and reteach these concepts. So after I graded the 25 people who took this baseline assessment, I realized that the majority of you have to take it over. That if you did not score a 70% or higher on this baseline assessment, then you are to retake it. Now, typically when you get a baseline assessment, or when a teacher gives you a baseline assessment, they call it a pretest. The teacher just gives you the test. They don't explain it. They don't help you. They don't help you with vocabulary. None of that. The goal is to give you the test cold turkey just to see where you're at, so they know what they need to teach. So that's why I just gave you the test. I didn't explain it. I didn't go over the passage with you. I didn't go over the questions with you. I just gave it to you cold turkey. And I wanted to see how much you knew. And please excuse the noise. You can hear the outside noise. So I wanted you to know, or I wanted to see how much you knew without any help from me. Now that I've graded the test, I know what I need to go over and what I need to teach to help you score higher this time around. So after I graded the baseline assessment, my first impression, my first instinct was you just didn't read the passage. Not only didn't you read the passage, but you didn't annotate. You didn't make notes while you were reading. But guess what? I taught you how to annotate. I also gave you additional practice on locating the central idea. And I've also given you additional practice on textual evidence. So once I graded the baseline assessment, I was able to assess what I needed to give you more practice on. So you needed more practice on textual evidence, going back to the passage and proving from the passage that your answer is correct, and your answer is correct because you found a line in the passage to prove that your answer is correct. That's textual evidence. I gave you extra practice with that. I gave you extra practice with identifying the central idea. That's why you had so many passages about Google and so many passages about Valentine's Day, because I wanted you to gain extra practice on locating the central idea. And I noticed that after I graded this baseline assessment for the first time, I noticed that you just didn't read and you didn't take notes while you were reading. So I gave you several assignments on annotation. So now you know how to do all of these things, so your scores should go up the second time you take this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all 13 paragraphs again, and then you're going to retake this assessment. So the title of this passage, this short story, is Departure by Sherwood Anderson. So everything that you see in red, I already took notes. I already annotated this text. So as I read this text, I took notes and I highlighted it in red. So please pay attention as I read and as I go over my annotation marks, my notes. So Departure by Sherwood Anderson. So the first thing I noticed, or the first thing I did, was I asked questions because the title of this selection is Departure. So I said, or I asked, who is leaving? Why is the person leaving? Where is the person going? How does this person feel about leaving? So as I'm reading the text, I should get an answer to these 1, 2, 3, 4 questions. Paragraph 1. Young George Willard got out of bed at 4 in the morning. It was April and the young tree leaves were just coming out of their buds. The trees along the residence streets in Winesburg are maple and the seeds are winged. When the wind blows, they whirl crazily about, feeling the air and making a carpet underfoot. So I already know that this story is about George Willard. It's 4 in the morning and it's in April. So the story takes place in April, and the main character is George Willard, and he gets up at 4 in the morning. And then I understand that April is in the springtime. So that means, I'm right here, that means that if April is in the springtime, spring symbolizes new beginnings. So the author is already telling me that this passage is about George going off or starting a new beginning in his life. All right, paragraph 2. George came downstairs into the hotel office carrying a brown leather bag. His trunk was packed for departure. Since 2 o'clock, he had been awake thinking of the journey he was about to take and wondering what he would find at the end of his journey. The boy who slept in the hotel office lay on a cot by the door. His mouth was open and he snored lustily. George crept past the cot and went out into the silent, deserted main street. The east was pink with the dawn, and long streaks of light climbed into the sky where a few stars still shone. All right, here are my annotation notes. Right here it says that George had been up since 2 o'clock in the morning, thinking about his journey. That let me know that George was excited, he was nervous, and he was unsure because he couldn't sleep. He was up at 2 o'clock in the morning thinking about where is this new beginning going to take me. All right, paragraph 3. Beyond the last house on Trunion Pike in Winesburg, there is a great stretch of open fields. The fields are owned by farmers who live in town and drive homeward at evening along Trunion Pike in light creaking wagons. In the fields are planted berries and small fruits. In the late afternoon in the hot summers, when the road and the fields are covered with dust, a smoky haze lies over the great flat basin of land. To look across it is like looking across the sea. In the spring, when the land is green, the effect is somewhat different. The land becomes a wide green billiard table on which tiny human insects toil up and down. So in this paragraph, just what stood out to me is that farmers live in Winesburg. This is a community of farmers. That a lot of people in this community, they farm for a living, or they own a farm and they are farmers, and this is what they do for a living. All right, paragraph 4. All through his boyhood and young manhood, George Willard had been in the habit of walking on Trunion Pike. He had been in the midst of the great open place on winter nights when it was covered with snow and only the moon looked down at him. He had been there in the fall when bleak winds blew and on summer evenings when the air vibrated with the song of insects. On the April morning, he wanted to go there again, to walk again in the silence. He did walk to where the road dipped down by a little stream 2 miles from town and then turned and walked silently back again. When he got to Main Street, clerks were sweeping the sidewalks before the stores. "Hey, you George, how does it feel to be going away?" they asked. All right, after I read this paragraph, this lets me know that George was a person of routine and habit, because it says all through his boyhood and young manhood, he did the same thing every season. Every year, every season, he did the same thing. He walked the same paths. Every year, every season, he did the same thing. He walked the same paths over and over again. So George was a person of habit and routine, and that Winesburg was all that he knew, because he did this year after year after year. All right, paragraph 5. The westbound train leaves Winesburg at 7:45 in the morning. Tom Little is conductor. His train runs from Cleveland to where it connects with the Great Trunk Line Railroad with terminals in Chicago and New York. Tom has what in railroad circles is called an easy run. Every evening he returns to his family. In the fall and spring, he spends his Sundays fishing in Lake Erie. He has a round red face and small blue eyes. He knows the people in the towns along his railroad better than a city man knows the people who live in his apartment building. So here we meet Tom Little, the conductor. This is the person who's going to be driving the train that is going to take George to his new city, to his Tom is the conductor of the train. He's responsible for operating the train. He is the one that is going to be responsible for operating the train that George is getting on to take him to his new destination, to take him to his new adventure. Tom Little, the conductor. And Tom Little is also a person of habit. He does the same thing every day. He goes from Winesburg to Cleveland every single day. Every single day he goes from Winesburg to Cleveland. And then in the fall and springtime, he spends his Sundays fishing in Lake Erie. So here is another sign that the people of Winesburg are people of habit. They're people of comfort. They don't go too far out their comfort zone. They don't like change. They don't like to do anything different. And Tom Little is another character in this story that reinforces that. Okay, paragraph 6. George came down the little incline from the New Willard house at 7 o'clock. Tom Willard carried his bag. The son had become taller than the father. So now we see George's father. His name is Tom. And we see that George is now taller than his father. In my notes, I said that this symbolizes that George has outgrown the town of Winesburg. We also see that George is very punctual. He's a very responsible person. Because the train does not leave until 7:45 in the morning. But George is ready to leave at 7 in the morning. He's ready to go. That also shows that he's excited about going. Because he's already packed. He's ready to go. He has 45 minutes until the train leaves, but he's ready at 7 o'clock. Okay? Paragraph 7. On the station platform, everyone shook the young man's hand. More than a dozen people waited about. Then they talked of their own affairs. Even Will Henderson, who was lazy and often slept until 9, had got out of bed. George was embarrassed. Gertrude Wilmot, a tall, thin woman of 50 who worked in the Winesburg post office, came along the station platform. She had never before paid any attention to George. Now she stopped and put out her hand. In 2 words, she voiced what everyone felt. Good luck, she said sharply, and then turning, went on her way. All right. So obviously the train station is not too far from where George lives because in just one paragraph he went from his house to the train station. So he's standing on the platform, waiting to board the train, and all the people from Winesburg, they come and they, to say goodbye to George. Even one person, Will Henderson, he was lazy. He often slept in until 9 o'clock in the morning. He even got out of bed early in the morning to see George off. And George was embarrassed by all of this attention. So a question I could have asked is, why was George embarrassed? And then the woman that worked at the post office, Gertrude Wilmot, she comes. She says good luck to him, and then she walks away. Also notice that the people of the town of Winesburg, it says it right here, they come and they shake George's hand, and then immediately they just start talking about other stuff. Nobody offers advice to George. Nobody says to George, hey, we're going to miss you. Take care of yourself. None of that. They shake his hand. Gertrude Wilmot says, good luck to you. She walks away. And then everybody just goes back to talking about everyday life. So we see that George was shy. He wasn't confident. He was scared. He was nervous. We see that the people of Winesburg shook his hand and then immediately started talking about other things, which shows that they're just not interested in George and his new adventure. But it also shows that not too many people leave Winesburg. Because for the people of Winesburg to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning and see George off, it lets you know that not too many people leave Winesburg. So this must be a very big deal. It must be a very big deal that George has decided to leave Winesburg. So that could explain why George was embarrassed. Because they're making this big fuss over him. They're making this big fuss over him because not too many people leave this small town of Winesburg. All right. This also tells me that people didn't even pay attention to George. And Gertrude Wilmot is an example of this. And when I say pay attention, they're really not interested in George as a human being. She just shook his hand. She said good luck, and then she walked off. All right, paragraph 8. When the train came into the station, George felt relieved. He scampered hurriedly aboard. Helen White came running along Main Street, hoping to have a parting word with him, but he had found a seat and did not see her. When the train started, Tom Little punched his ticket, grinned, and although he knew George well and knew on what adventure he was just setting out, made no comment. Tom had seen 1,000 George Willers go out of their towns to the city. It was a commonplace enough incident with him. In the car, there was a man who had just invited Tom to go on a fishing trip to Sandusky Bay. He wanted to accept the invitation and talk over details. So in paragraph 8, we see that George felt relieved. I asked the question, why did he feel relieved? Was he glad the fake goodbyes were over? Like, did he feel like that they were just being fake because they never really paid attention to him anyway, growing up in the town of Winesburg? So why all of this attention now? Also, we see that the conductor of the train, Tom Little, he's used to people like George. Remember I said in paragraph 7 that the townspeople of Winesburg are not used to people leaving. But Tom, he operates a train for a living. So he sees people like George all the time. coming on board the train to go to a different city and start a new life and to find a new adventure. People like George are not new to Tom. So he sees Tom differently than the people of Winesburg. George is no stranger to Tom. Tom has seen thousands of Georges in his lifetime. People who, are going somewhere to start a new life. But even though Tom has seen plenty of Georges in his lifetime, he was interested in talking to a man that invited him on a fishing trip. So he really didn't have too much to say to George. So it seems to me that George is just by himself out here. That George really doesn't have a support system. It seems like he's just out here alone by himself. Excuse me. All right, paragraph 9. George glanced up and down the car to be sure no one was looking, then took out his pocketbook and counted his money. His mind was occupied with a desire not to appear green. Almost the last words his father had said to him concerned the matter of his behavior when he got to the city. Be a sharp one, Tom Willard had said. Keep your eyes on your money. Be awake. That's the ticket. Don't let anyone think you're a greenhorn. All right, so in paragraph number 9, we see that George is cautious. He looks around, he checks his surroundings, he makes sure that no one is looking as he takes out his wallet and counts his money, because he doesn't want to appear gullible. He doesn't want to appear as an outsider when he arrives to the city. Paragraph 10. After George counted his money, he looked out of the window and was surprised to see the train was still in Winesburg. Paragraph 11. The young man going out of his town to meet the adventure of life began to think, but he did not think of anything very big or dramatic. So right here, I said this sentence is important because it shows that George had to leave Winesburg to understand that life is an adventure, exciting, surprising. That he had to leave Winesburg in order to come to that realization. If he had stayed in Winesburg, George would have never realized that life is meant to be fun. It's meant to be exciting. It's meant to be surprising. It's meant to be an adventure. And obviously, Winesburg did not give George that impression. Winesburg was not a place of adventure. It was not a place of fun. It was not exciting at all. Paragraph 12. He thought of little things. Turk Smollett wheeling boards through the main street of his town in the morning. Butch Wheeler, the lamplighter of Winesburg, hurrying through the streets on a summer evening and holding a torch in his hand. Helen White, standing by a window in the Winesburg post office and putting a stamp on an envelope. I had nothing to say about paragraph 12. And sometimes it's like that. You could read a paragraph and there's nothing that excites you about the paragraph or nothing that stands out to you about the paragraph. So therefore, there's no need for you to annotate that paragraph or take notes on that paragraph. All right, and the last paragraph, paragraph 13. The young man's mind was carried away by his growing passion for dreams. One looking at him would not have thought him particularly sharp. With the recollection of little things occupying his mind, he closed his eyes and leaned back in the car seat. He stayed that way for a long time, and when he aroused himself and again looked out of the window, the town of Winesburg disappeared. And his life there had become but a background on which to paint the dreams of his manhood. All right, so I just went through all 13 paragraphs. I showed you in red, I demonstrated to you how I annotated the text, how I took notes on the text, on the short story, how I had a conversation with the text, the short story. I showed you this. I demonstrated this as I was reading the text. This is what you do when you are taking an assessment that is assessing your reading comprehension. When you're taking a test that is seeing how well you comprehend what you've read, the best thing to do is to take notes or to annotate while you are reading. That way, it is that way it can ensure that you do better on the test if you annotate and take notes while you're reading. So if you are ever taking a test that is testing to see how well you can comprehend or understand what you've just read, the best thing is to do what I just demonstrated. Annotate, take notes on what you are reading. And I just demonstrated that to you. So when I checked your baseline assessment the first time for this short story, Departure, I immediately knew that most of you did not read it and you did not annotate while you read, or you did not take notes while you read. So I read it to you and I took notes and I explained to you the notes that I took. So now you're ready to complete your baseline assessment again. Now, for some of you, you're going to get the same 6 multiple choice questions that you received before for this short story, and you're going to answer them again. Now that I've read it, now that I've annotated, and now that I've explained to you my annotation marks, you should do much better on the second time taking this baseline assessment. Now, that's only for 25 of you. Only 25 of you will have 6 multiple choice questions. The rest of you are going to do a constructed response. Now, let me make this clear. 25 of you will have 6 multiple choice questions and a constructed response, because that was on the first baseline test. When you first took this baseline assessment or this pretest, it came with 6 multiple choice questions and it came with a constructed response, a writing prompt. So for the 25 people who took this the first time, the week of September 21st, 2020, you are going to have those same 6 multiple choice. You are going to have those same 6 multiple choice questions again, along with a constructed response, a writing prompt. Okay. The rest of you will only have the writing prompt, because my data, the data that I collect, I have to collect the data from the people who originally took it the first time. I cannot add new people to this because otherwise it's going to skew the data. That's why it's only going to be 25 of you who are going to receive 6 multiple choice questions and a constructed response. Everybody else will just have a constructed response. But in order to do the constructed response, you had to watch this instructional video. You had to listen to me. Wait, let me go back. In order to receive the full 50 points on the constructed response, for those of you who just have to do the constructed response, for you that only have to do the constructed response, and for those of you who only have to do the constructed response, to receive the full 50 points on the constructed response, you still had to watch me read the paragraphs and explain my annotation marks. I will know if you did not watch this video and you did not listen to me read the paragraphs and you did not listen to me explain my annotation marks in red, I will know that you didn't watch that and listen to it based on how well you do on the constructive response. All right, so here's how to do the constructive response. The constructive response says this. Okay. Describe, we're right here. All right. Describe how the author vividly characterizes the town of Winesburg throughout the passage in a way that makes it easy for the reader to understand why George is choosing to leave. Use evidence from the passage to support your response. Whenever you see, use evidence. Whenever you see, use evidence from the passage to support your response. That means that you need textual evidence. That means that you got to go back to the story and find a line to support your answer, to support your opinion, to support your response. Now, the students who took this the first time, most of you didn't even answer this. So that's why you scored so low. Most of you didn't even write a response to this writing prompt. So you automatically lost 50 points. So let's see what this is asking you to do. It's asking you to describe, to tell. Tell me how the author vividly characterizes. Now, I think my assessment is when I check my assessment is this. When I checked the test the first time, the baseline assessment the first time, the pre-test the first time, I came to the conclusion that the reason why the 25 of you that took it the first time did not do the writing prompt is because you didn't know what characterizes meant. You didn't even bother to look it up. Characterizes means to describe. Now, obviously, if you were taking the test face to face, you couldn't use any other aids. You couldn't use a dictionary or your phone or anything to look up the definition of characterizes. So you would have had to determine what characterizes means using context clues. So even if you didn't know even if you didn't have access to a dictionary, you should have known enough to know that this is asking you to say, why did George want to leave? Even if you didn't know what characterizes meant, this writing prompt tells you enough to know that you need to answer the question, why did George choose to leave? What was it about Winesburg that made George want to leave? So you didn't even have to know what characterize meant. This alone right here was enough to tell you that I'm supposed to write about why George wanted to leave. Okay, so that's what this writing prompt is asking you to do. It's asking you to say why George wanted to leave. And then you have to provide textual evidence from the story to prove why George wanted to leave. Now, I already wrote the paragraph for you. You just have to fill in the blanks. These are blanks right here. This is a blank. This is a blank. And this is a blank. I already wrote the paragraph for you. I already wrote the paragraph for you. I already wrote the paragraph for you. Just fill in the blanks. Here's a blank. Here's a blank. Here's a blank. Wait a minute. Oops. Hold on. Let me go back and change that. All right. So here's a blank right here. Here's a blank. Here's a blank. Here's a blank. And here's a blank. So the first sentence of any, whenever you answer a writing prompt, whenever they're telling you this is a constructive response or a writing prompt. A writing prompt means that you are to answer the question in at least one paragraph. So in one paragraph, you are to tell me why George is choosing to leave. What was it about it? What was it about the town of Winesburg that made George want to leave? I already wrote the paragraph for you. I just need you to fill in these blanks. So the very first sentence of any constructive response is that you're supposed to just repeat what they're asking you to do. And that's what I did. In Departure by Sherwood Anderson, he vividly characterizes the town of Winesburg throughout the passage in a way that makes it easy for the reader to understand why George is choosing to leave. The first sentence is all I did was just rewrite the writing prompt. That's whenever you whenever you respond to a writing prompt, just the first sentence is rewrite the writing prompt. So when you're going to answer a constructive response, the very first sentence in that paragraph, just rewrite the writing prompt. This is the writing prompt right here. This right here, let me highlight it. Wait a minute, hold on. This right here is the writing prompt. So when it's time for you to answer it, when it's time for you to write the paragraph, just rewrite that in the first sentence. And that's what I did. I gave you the name of it. I gave you the name of the passage, the person who wrote it, and I just rewrote it. Now, first one, you need to write what I wrote. All you got to do is write what I wrote, or type what I wrote, rather. You got to go back to the short story Departure and find one sentence where the author describes Winesburg. Just find one sentence where the author describes Winesburg and then type it right here. Then you have to explain it. So based on this description, I understand why George wanted to leave, for the reason being, whatever you put right here, why would George want to leave? Based on how the author described Winesburg right here, why would George want to leave? Type that right here. All right. The next sentence. Notice I'm using transition words. Secondly, to begin with, in order for you to write a solid, logical paragraph that goes in chronological order, you must use transition words. So here I said, here's a in this sentence right here, secondly, Winesburg is, or I should say this. I don't want to say what Winesburg can be described as go back to the short story and find another sentence different from this one. Find another sentence where the author describes Winesburg. And type it right here. This further supports why George wanted to leave because what? After you find a second sentence that describes the town of Winesburg, why would this make George want to leave even more? And maybe I should put that. And then write your reasoning here. And then you just close it out. You write your concluding sentence. And all you do for the concluding sentence is just put a transition word to show that you're ending, and then just rewrite your topic sentence, the first sentence. That's all I did for the concluding sentence. The concluding sentence, which is this right here, all of this right here is the concluding sentence. All I did was I typed a transition word to show that I'm ending. I'm done talking. I'm done proving my point. And then I just retyped my topic sentence, which is this right here. And I got my topic sentence from right here. My topic sentence came from right here. This is what my entire paragraph is going to be about. Why George wanted to leave. What was it about the town of Winesburg that made George want to leave? This entire paragraph, the central idea, the main idea of this entire paragraph that you're getting ready to complete, the main idea, the central idea is why George, what was it about Winesburg, the town of Winesburg that made George want to leave? What was it about this place that George was like, I can't stay here, I gotta go? I wrote it for you. You just need to fill in the blanks. That's all you need to do. Eventually, I won't have to write it for you. You'll know the format like the back of your hand, and you'll be able to write all your constructive responses just like this. You'll have a topic sentence. You'll have textual evidence. You'll explain your textual evidence. You'll give us some more textual evidence. You'll explain your textual evidence. And then you'll end your paragraph with a concluding sentence, which is just repeating your topic sentence. That's the formula. That is the formula for writing a constructed response. The formula is this. If you remember this formula, you'll be able to write any constructed response and score highly or score a high point, or I don't want to say that. If you remember this formula, you'll be able to get the total possible points for any constructed response. That's what I want to say. If you remember this formula for writing a constructed response, if you remember this formula, you will receive the highest possible points for any constructed response. All right. Here's the formula. All right. So this is the formula for writing. This is the formula for writing a constructed response or writing a one-paragraph written response to a writing prompt. Topic sentence plus textual evidence A plus one sentence explaining textual evidence A. That should say textual evidence A, not textual evidence B. Let's see. Plus textual evidence B plus one sentence explaining textual evidence B plus concluding sentence. That's it. If you remember this formula, you'll be able to write a constructive response to any writing prompt. And it will follow a logical order. And you will always tell the person what the you'll always be able to you'll always tell the person what the paragraph is about. It will follow a logical order, and you'll always provide evidence to support your opinion. So this is the formula. Topic sentence. A topic sentence tells the reader what your entire paragraph is about. Textual evidence is evidence from the story or the passage to prove your topic sentence. Then you have to explain your textual evidence. Then you need some more textual evidence to support your topic sentence. Then you got to explain your textual evidence. And what I mean by explaining is, how does your textual evidence support your topic sentence? That's what I mean by explaining. How does your textual evidence support your topic sentence? That's what I mean by explaining. So I'm going to write that. I'm going to give you that. A lot of you are really good at going to the story and finding a sentence to support your opinion, but you're not good at explaining it. So what? You chose that sentence. What does that got? So what? You chose that sentence from the so what? You chose that sentence from the passage or from the story. Well, how does that sentence support your topic sentence? How does that sentence from the story support your opinion? You have to explain it. So that's what I mean by explaining. Explaining means, how does your textual evidence support your topic sentence? Okay, I know this video is long. It's an hour. It's going to be about an hour long. But I had to explain how you do a constructive response, because everybody is responsible for the constructive response. Everybody. There are only 25 of you that are responsible for 6 multiple choice questions and a constructive response, because those 25 students are the ones who took this baseline assessment the first time. Now you have to retake it after I went through and I pretty much have explained it and went over it with you. So that's why this instructional video is so long. So I suggest you take your time. I need to go back. I see some mistakes. I suggest you take your time and you watch the video first before you attempt to even do the constructive response and to do the baseline assessment the second time. All right, so this is Miss Aberhart. That is all. For this particular instructional video, yes, it has been long, but I had to make sure that I covered everything so that you know how to write an academically sound constructed response. It also is long because this is my first time introducing the writing process to you. So the video was long. So I suggest, like I said, watch the video, all of it. Watch it in bits and pieces. Take notes as you're watching it, and then go back to completing the assignment, which is the constructed response. All of you are completing the constructed response, and only 25 of you are doing 6 multiple choice questions and the constructed response. The 25 of you who are doing the 6 multiple choice questions and the constructed response, you are going to receive a private chat. Your assignment will come through private chat. Everybody else, your assignment will be where it always is, in Teams under assignments. Okay, that's it. Talk to you later.